Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video. And, the last time that I actually did a video like this, I think that it was actually probably quite a while ago. Interestingly enough, I think that it actually was also about a Terence Bud Crawford and Naoya Inoue situation. But Dante's Boxing Nation, he made a recent video that I thought was very particularly interesting, talking about the Naoya Inoue Terence Bud Crawford situation. And Dante's Boxing Nation and a lot of the LDBC and new media channels, but especially the new media channels, especially within that of Dante's Boxing Nation and that of Aki TV, they've been trying to brainwash a lot of people into making you force feed this narrative that Terence Bud Crawford, that he is the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. And let me tell you what, Terence Bud Crawford deserves a great amount of credit. And if you debate him as the number one pound for pound fighter, he definitely is up there. Terence Bud Crawford, you could debate right now, is the clear number one pound for pound fighter. I don't think that that's necessarily something that's delusional. I think that that's something that you can, of course, very much argue. Terence Bud Crawford is right now debatably the number one pound for pound fighter. But when you talk about it being, at least at the moment, ever since Inoue's and that of Alexander Usyk's accomplishments, it being quote unquote undisputed, and apparently Inoue and Usyk's ranking, if you rank them at number one pound for pound, that it's completely a racialized, move, and that it's something that clearly you're doing because you have a racist or a racial agenda. To me, I just think that that's something that's absolutely ludicrous. Now, are there some people that are probably doing it because of a racial motivation? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But at the end of the day, Dante's Boxing Nation has had Terence Bud Crawford at the number one pound for pound spot pretty much almost for the better part of this past decade. Even at certain points, if we're going to really be real about Mr. Terence Bud Crawford, when he really didn't belong or deserve to be there at the number one pound for pound spot. And listen, I like Terence Bud Crawford as a fighter. In fact, I love Terence Bud Crawford as a fighter. I think he's one of the all-time greats. I think he's one of the greater fighters I've personally ever seen. In terms of skills, he's up there with a lot of fighters that I pretty much have ever seen. The problem is with Terence Bud Crawford, when you talk about his career, and people can admit this, they cannot admit this, it is what it is. He does not have the deepest of resumes. And I understand that a lot of people, of course, are going to disagree. They're going to say, well, what about this guy? What about this guy? Listen, if we're talking about legitimate A-grade level fighters, Terence Bud Crawford has fought about 4 debatable A-grade level fighters in his career. Of course, there was the Errol Spence Jr. win, which of course was the biggest win of his career. He showed out in that fight, and he deserves a great amount of credit. There was the Sean Showtime Porter win, which I give him a great amount of credit for. Of course, he also defeated Victor Postol, and he also defeated Yuriorkis Gamboa. None of those other fighters that he defeated, in my personal view, are A-grade level fighters. Mean Machine is not an A-grade level fighter. Jeff Horn is not an A-grade level fighter. Jose Benavidez, Raimundo Beltran, Julius Ndango, Thomas Delorme, none of these other guys are A-grade level fighters. Now, if you want to claim overall that they're good little B-grade contenders, that's something that, you can heavily debate. But the question is that how come Dante's Boxing Nation and, new media, they'll always state this thing about Inoue and Usyk, that them being potentially placed at the number one pound for pound spot, overall, that it is a completely racialized thing. Well, listen, at the end of the day, Inoue and Usyk, whether people want to admit it or not, when you talk about the accomplishments of all 3 of those fighters for their weight classes, the skill sets overall for all those weight classes, and the dominance for all those weight classes, especially with Alexander Usyk recently beating 2 guys that outlengthened him and outweighed him by a decent amount in his most recent fights, and clear A-grade level fighters, Usyk is going to have to be debated as the number one pound for pound fighter. It is what it is. And I think that Terence Bud Crawford, that he probably would have been my clear number one pound for pound fighter as of recent once he defeated Errol Spence Jr. But to be quite honest with you, right now, if I was going to make a debate about who my number one pound for pound fighter is, I probably would have to say that of Alexander Usyk. And it isn't that I don't think that Terence Bud Crawford is not comparatively in terms of skills or in terms of dominance or anything like that, but Alexander Usyk was just able to defeat 2 fighters in that weight class. Of course, one could debate that Anthony Joshua and Fury, that they're not quite as skilled as what an Alexander Usyk is. But really, Crawford hasn't really fought anyone in his career that's really been as skilled as him either. So, I mean, we can make that case all we want to. But I think that Alexander Usyk, when you talk about the Tyson Fury win, one could debate that that is a bigger win in his career than any of the wins over that with Terence Bud Crawford, even Errol Spence Jr. And in my view, that says a lot because Tyson Fury I held in somewhat of high esteem. He was within my top 5 pound for pound list for a little bit. He certainly was within my top 10 pound for pound. Errol Spence was also within my top 5 pound for pound, but Errol Spence Jr., in my view, cannot fight in as much of a multitude of ways as what a Tyson Fury can fight in. Now, is there certain things that Errol Spence would probably be a little bit better in, such as defensively responsible maybe than a Tyson Fury and probably a power puncher overall for his size and all that stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Certainly. But in terms of a heavyweight, Tyson Fury was going to go down as the best heavyweight of this era unless either AJ Anthony Joshua or Alexander Usyk did something about it. And the man that put it to an end, at least at the current moment in time, was a 6'3", 78-inch arm reach, 220-pound guy over a 6'9", 260-pound in this fight guy with an 85-inch arm reach. That's what Alexander Usyk was able to do. That win, in my view, has to be right there when Sugar Ray Leonard was able to beat Marvin Hagler in terms of beating a great fighter that was a decent amount bigger than them. Now, if you want to claim that Fury is not as great as Marvin Hagler, that's up to you. I understand that point. And of course, when Mayweather was able to beat that of Canelo Alvarez. Of course, I don't think Canelo was at his absolute peak, but at the end of the day, he still would have been probably one of the top 10 pound for pound fighters. Crawford nor Inoue right now probably have a win like that, and at the moment, that's probably what is putting Alexander Usyk as my number 1 pound for pound fighter. But of course, cases could be named for Inoue and that of Terence Bud Crawford. It just depends on your standards. But I'm not a fan of this bullshit narrative that the LDBC and new media, what they always love to push about how their black fighters are always being disrespected and all sort of stuff, and then they do the exact same shit to basically the non-black fighters because they don't want them to be remembered as debatably the best of that generation. So it is what it is. But anyways, Dante's Boxing Nation, he's going to be talking about Inoue, allegedly indicating that he thinks that Crawford is the number 1 pound for pound fighter. And Inoue could very potentially think that, but it's just interesting because Dante's Boxing Nation, he loves to not talk about the opinion of Inoue or some of these other guys, at least being taken seriously, unless it fits his narrative, unless it fits his narrative. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say, and then I'm going to review the comment section because it's going to be a very interesting one. And it's going to be very revelatory once again about what new media and the LDBC is truly about. Which once again, which I've been saying for a very long time, race fans as well, and a very big pro-black cult. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what they have to say.
For me, I think it's important for me to recognize myself as the best. But Crawford Spence fight is something that I have been very impressed with.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So that was Naoya Inoue praising Terence Crawford when he was asked if he believes he's the best fighter in the world. He said, I think it's important for me to recognize myself as the best. But that Crawford versus Errol Spence fight, it was impressive. Now, when you consider the fact that we just seen Usyk versus Tyson Fury, a couple weeks ago, and Naoya Inoue is still talking about Crawford versus Errol Spence, that is high praise coming from a fighter who's considered pound for pound top 3, one of the best fighters in the world.
I agree, it definitely is high praise. And that could be Inoue's way of stating that he believes that, that Terence Bud Crawford, at least in his mind, is pretty much his only peer in terms of being the number 1 pound for pound fighter. Now, I'm sure that he takes a look at Alexander Usyk and also says that he could be a little bit of a peer as well. But maybe he just finds Terence Bud Crawford a little bit more impressive. But it's very interesting that Dante's Boxing Nation right now is calling Inoue for sure now one of the top 3 pound for pound fighters. Because I remember a video not too long ago when Cromwell Moulton, that new black American kid, I believe that's a part of the Mayweather gym, when he came out with the top 5 pound for pound list. And I think that it was nothing but black American fighters, even certain fighters that I did not think accomplished enough to be within the top 5 pound for pound, such as Gervonta Tank Davis. But it is what it is. When it comes down to it, he may have been in a way there. I can't personally remember. But Dante's Boxing Nation, he had no problem with Inoue being number 4 or number 5 on the list. And he said the only change that I would make is that, this would happen. He did not have Inoue within his top 3 pound per pound list. So it's just interesting now that he calls Inoue a top 3 pound per pound fighter. Now that Inoue said something that fits his narrative and he wants to make it seem like Inoue is now for sure one of the top 3 pound-for-pound fighters, so we need to take his opinion into account. Right, I wonder if Inoue would state that if he thought that Usyk or that of Canelo Alvarez was the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. I wonder how seriously Dante would take it then.
When it comes to Terence Crawford, I've never seen a pound-for-pound king have so many other fighters on the top of the list praise him and say similar things about him. Right after Alexander Usyk.
Well, sure we have. We've seen it with that of Canelo Alvarez. We've seen it with all the Black American fighters when they complimented him. The Charlo brothers. We've seen it with Devin Haney, who eventually was top 10 pound-for-pound. Devin Haney will tell you right now that he believed that Canelo was still #1 pound-for-pound. That's what Devin Haney will tell you. Gervonta Tank Davis said it. And according to DontaesBoxingNation, Gervonta Tank Davis is apparently a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. You know, when you talk about, certain black fighters, the Charlo brothers said it. Other guys said it. So how come overall, once again, their opinions were not taken into account, but they were trying to appease the race fans. Oh, Jamel Charlo, remember, Dante's Boxing Nation said that Jamel Charlo overall had a great argument for being top 5 pound-for-pound. So we've seen this with Canelo Alvarez. But every time that one of those black fighters stated that they thought that Canelo was the top dog in that of boxing, he just stated overall that you're selling out your own people and that you're being a race fan and that you don't truly believe that. But then when it comes to this opinion needs to be taken seriously. Once again, the reason why I like to review Dante's Boxing Nation's videos is because for any of us that have a brain cell, the dude is full of shit. It is what it is. Don't get it twisted. I think that the LDBC and new media, I think that, of course, they cover black fighters in a better light, and that's a great thing because I do think that a lot of black fighters that they go through a lot of double standards and certain hate that is not deserved. That's all understandable. But when you talk about these channels being objective and logical and, purely just, sticking up for black excellence, no, that's not what they do. They're race fans as well. They're also racists. It is what it is. Just like a certain amount of these other channels or just like some of these other boxing fans that you see that try to degrade black fighters on a daily basis and don't keep the same standards. These LDBC and new media channels have the same motivations and the same narratives. All right, don't let them fool you.
Beat Tyson Fury, he praised Terence Crawford. He said that he would pick the 37-year-old Terence Crawford to beat the much bigger 33-year-old Canelo Alvarez. Usyk, he came out and he said, I say Terence wins. Listen, Terence is a different man. Terence, he works in 2 stances. He is very, very, very smart man. End quote.
Right, but let me also state this. Anyways, let me also state this, because Dante's Boxing Nation was basically stating all this shit about how Canelo Alvarez, this really speaks volumes about how so many people are picking against him within this fight, and it shows how limited of a fighter he actually is. But Usyk saying that Crawford's going to beat Canelo, that's really his way of saying that Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound guy. Why would that be Usyk's way of saying that Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound guy if Canelo Alvarez really is that limited of a fighter? And Usyk just beat the current best heavyweight of this generation, at least before Usyk ended up winning this fight, and a guy that was going to be even bigger against him than what Canelo would ever be against Terence Bud Crawford. So what you're really stating there, Dante, really doesn't make any sense unless you think that Canelo Alvarez is actually greater than what you're letting on.
What's amazing is Terence Crawford's been defending the pound-for-pound status for the last 6 or 7 years in the sport of boxing.
Because Terence Bud Crawford really hasn't deserved to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport of boxing for the past 10 years. It is what it is. People can get pissy about that. They can claim racism. They can claim all they want. They can boo-hoo all they want to. At the end of the day, Terence Bud Crawford, when he first entered into the sport, at least when we first seen about him, when he defeated Yuriorkis Gamboa, he was not in the debate as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. All right, it is what it is. And then even a little bit later on, when he became a champion at 140, there was talks about him debatably being the #1 pound-for-pound fighter once he unified the 140-pound weight class. But Dante likes to bring up Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. Crawford was not really the definitive #1 pound-for-pound fighter at that time. In fact, it was another black fighter, or at least mixed fighter, but, mainly black fighter, with that of Andre S.O.G. Ward. So stating that at that time that Terence Bud Crawford was the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, no, sir, Terence Bud Crawford was not the deserved #1 pound-for-pound fighter back then either. It was Andre S.O.G. Ward when he defeated Sergey the Crusher Kovalev.
Going all the way back to Roman Gonzalez, when old media was saying that he was pound-for-pound #1 over Terence Crawford. It's crazy because that sounds so long ago. It sounds like Roman Gonzalez is like 40 or 50 years old, but he's actually the same age as Terence Crawford, 36. I told you guys Terence was 37. That's because he's about to turn 37 in September. So after Roman Gonzalez got knocked out, then old media, they started to compare Terence Crawford to Lomachenko.
Right, and you know what? Lomachenko was defeating better champions and higher grade level contenders than what Terence Bud Crawford was. And even if we're really going to go there, Lomachenko probably has a better and more talented resume within 20-something fights or 20 total fights than what Crawford has within 40 total fights. It is what it is. You're talking about a guy that defeated Nicholas Walters, who was looked at as the most dangerous man in his division, knocked out Nonito Donaire and multiple other fighters, beat Guillermo Rigondeaux, who was one of the top 5, the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters, dominated Gary Russell Jr., beat Jorge Linares, and a multitude of other guys, and I'm supposed to believe that Lomachenko was not the number 1 pound-for-pound guy. Get the fuck out of here.
And as soon as they started saying that Loma was number 1, this is what Loma said.
Who do you think's number 1 right now? Кто ты думаешь сейчас номер 1?
Я думаю, что это Кроуфорд.
Crawford.
Now, just keep in mind, guys, Loma, he said that 6 years ago. And right before that same reporter asked him that question, that reporter was trying to convince Loma to say that he was number 1. But Loma wouldn't do it. Terence.
And let's keep this in mind overall that Terence Bud Crawford has recently stated blatantly that after Alexander Usyk defeated that of Tyson Fury, that Terence Bud Crawford said that Alexander Usyk could be debated as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. But there's no videos from DontaesBoxingNation or any of these guys claiming that, oh, this is a sign that Terence Crawford truly believes that Alexander Usyk is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. Dante really is such a snake. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Crawford has been on top of the sport before.
Like, the reason why I have no respect for these channels whatsoever, and I have to review them because these guys are so full of shit and so many people actually buy into their crap. But but the thing is that these guys, once again, they love to bitch, moan, and complain about all these double standards and all these, overall fake-ass narratives, and they do literally the exact same thing, if not even on a worse scale than any of the other channels or any of the other medias out there.
These fighters. The reason why Inoue is talking about how impressed he was with Crawford's performance over Errol Spence is because we seldomly see a fighter completely dominate a top 3, top 5 pound-for-pound fighter and make it look that easy. I'm talking about winning every single round and making it look like you're fighting against a journeyman.
Terence Bud Crawford definitely deserves a great amount of credit for that. Out of a fight that at least I can remember, when you talk about 2 guys that were looked at as 2 top 10 pound-for-pound guys, that was probably the most dominating performance that I had personally ever seen. But at the end of the day, I wonder if Terence Bud Crawford, if he were a different complexion, I mean, I really don't wonder. I have no doubt in my mind, but if Terence Bud Crawford overall were a different complexion, would he be giving Crawford really that much credit for the win over Errol Spence Jr. and debating him as the undisputed number 1 pound-for-pound fighter? No, he wouldn't be. But, a lot of people, let me put this into perspective, because a lot of people like to say that Errol Spence was a one-dimensional fighter. I don't think that he was a one-dimensional fighter. Do I think that he can probably fight in as good of a multitude of ways as what a Tyson Fury maybe could, even for his weight class? Maybe not, because Spence is a guy that really mainly likes to break you down. Yes, he can fight on the back foot, but he's not going to be able to beat a guy like Terence Bud Crawford on the back foot. That's never going to happen. It is what it is. Errol Spence is not going to be able to beat guys like Crawford or Crawford or Mayweather or certain guys like that on the back foot. He's going to have to break them down. He does not have the speed nor the boxing ability to beat those guys on the back foot. And you know what? It's okay, because honestly, even the greatest of fighters, they don't always overall have the ability to beat someone in the way that they originally wanted to. So Errol Spence was a great fighter, no doubt about it. And when Crawford defeated him, that finally was his signifying moment, because Spence was a legitimate top 10 to top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. So Crawford does deserve a lot of credit for that.
This is just an exhibition or a sparring match. I mean, we've seen other pound-for-pound fighters get dominant wins.
But the question would be is this: if we are talking about comparisons, when we talk about other fighters defeating fighters that would be within the top 5 or at least on the top 10 pound-for-pound list, you're talking about two pound-for-pound fighters that have fought each other. You're talking about fighters like Canelo and Golovkin, or you're talking about fights like Usyk versus that of Tyson Fury. The question is that is Errol Spence all around more skilled or better or a tougher fight for Crawford than what Gennady Golovkin was for Canelo or what a Fury was for Usyk? What I would personally say is that the one who probably had the tallest task out of all of them probably was that of Alexander Usyk, not only because of the skill of Tyson Fury, but also because of the size advantage that he had over that of Alexander Usyk, But what I will say is that when you talk about Errol Spence Jr. and Gennady Golovkin, I mean, they're probably similar in terms of a threat level. Maybe if you want to state that personally, I would probably say that I think that Gennady Golovkin would probably be, more of a threat compared to that of Errol Spence. But you know what? Certain people would disagree. Certain people would disagree because Errol Spence did defeat a great amount of contenders, and he defeated some good ones. He defeated Kell Brook when he was still good. He defeated Danny Garcia when he was still good. He defeated overall that of Sean Porter when he was still good. He defeated a multitude of other guys. So honestly, maybe I'm shortchanging it a little bit. I mean, you could state that it's someone on the same level if you wanted to.
But not over fighters on the level of an Errol Spence. Not to mention, when we use the word pound for pound, when you think of Terence Crawford in any division, if you put him against every other fighter on the pound for pound list, if everyone on that list was all in the same weight class, Terence Crawford would most likely be favored against all of them, which is what makes him pound for pound the best fighter in the world. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
A lot of y'all.
Well, you can make that debate overall all you want to, and I kind of understand it. But I'm not really someone overall that likes to use that debate because I'm not someone that just goes completely off the eye test. Because if Terence Bud Crawford and Inoue, if they were similar in physical dimensions, and if they were in the same exact weight class, who actually knows who would be favored in that fight? We don't exactly know. If Canelo Alvarez and Terence Bud Crawford were in the same weight class, who actually knows who would be favored within that fight? We don't know. If Usyk and Crawford or Lomachenko and Crawford were within the same weight class, would Crawford be 100% favored? It's possible that he'd be favored in all those fights, but we don't know. And in my view, you can't really use that as a main debate overall for someone being the number one pound-for-pound fighter. You have to go off of results and accomplishments. You can't go off of complete hypotheticals. That's not how you rank something overall in terms of a list. All that really is a bunch of fanboyish mumbo jumbo. It is what it is. But Dante loves to use that point. But overall, if this were to go for that of other fighters, he wouldn't go by that standard. But anyways, I just thought that I would review this comment section because once again, it's going to be very revelatory once again. A certain amount of the followers that follow Dante's Boxing Nation and what this channel is truly about. But anyways, so let's get into it. Let's see what they have to say. So, Inoue and Usyk are basically saying that Bud is number one pound for pound without directly saying it. Well, I think that Inoue might potentially be saying that if you want to say that, or that at least that Inoue believes that Crawford is a peer in terms of, his pound for pound status. I don't think that Alexander Usyk has ever indirectly stated that Terence Bud Crawford, he believes that he's the number one pound for pound fighter. I mean, maybe he has, but just because he would favor Crawford over Canelo Alvarez, I don't think that really means that he thinks that Crawford is a greater fighter than him. I mean, he could. We don't know. But, at the end of the day, what that's pretty much him signifying is that Crawford is another great and intelligent fighter like me. When I take a look at Terence Bud Crawford, I see a lot within him that I see in myself. And I was just able to beat a man that out-lengthened me overall by quite a bit, that outweighed me by quite a bit, and on top of that was a decently skilled fighter. If I can do it overall, Crawford is another greatly talented fighter. He possibly could do it as well. But Dante's Boxing Nation loves to go upon this narrative about how limited Canelo Alvarez is. And in one video or multiple videos, he loves to talk about, how this makes Canelo look bad and how limited of a fighter he actually is because so many people are favoring the smaller man in Terence Bud Crawford. But then in return, what he'll also state within the same video, which doesn't make any sense, is that Alexander Usyk stating that Crawford would beat Canelo, that's Usyk's way of stating that Crawford is clearly better than him, which doesn't make any sense. Because if you're going to state that Canelo Alvarez is that limited of a fighter, well then let's call him a limited fighter across the board. So what that basically means is that Usyk believes that Crawford is skilled enough to beat a bigger guy, but someone that is nowhere near as skilled as him. You know, Tyson Fury was a guy that was a great all-around skilled heavyweight fighter that could pretty much do a lot of great things within that of the ring. Now, is he quite as skilled as Usyk is? No, he's not. You know, but at the end of the day, you know, Usyk was just able to beat a guy that outreached him by several inches and outweighed him by 30 plus pounds. Crawford has not had a win like that in his career, so why would that be Usyk's way of claiming that, once again, that Terence Bud Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, unless, once again, Dante, you're admitting that Canelo is better than what you claim that he is, which I already know that you believe that, but it is what it is. Anyways, but let's see overall what these other comments have to say. Bud says Usyk. Usyk says Bud. Inoue says Bud. Haters act like they know more about actual fighters and trainers. That's right. Bud did say Usyk. But it's very interesting that Dante's Boxing Nation, how he hasn't mentioned that whatsoever. It's just very interesting. Once again, I don't mind addressing the double standards that black fighters go through from that of ESPN and Ring Magazine and some of these other guys, you know, but don't bitch, moan, and complain about certain fighters not being on the pound-for-pound list or not getting overall their just due, and then you do the same exact thing to non-black fighters. That's all these guys do. They love to bitch, moan, and complain, and then do the same exact thing overall, you know, when it comes down to it. You know, they're like a robber overall, you know, that complains about their house, their house getting stolen shit from it. Like, come on. You know, it is what it is. Anyways, let's see. Old media is pushing this narrative. Bud knows the game. Well, listen, at the end of the day, people can like it, they can not like it. Usyk and Inoue, they're going to have a debate as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. Because at the end of the day, Crawford, and the hurtful truth is that Crawford just does not have a Canelo or a Mayweather or a Pacquiao resume. He just doesn't. He's never going to have that, at least overall, you know, more than likely. When you talk about those type of fighters, those are fighters that have had over a dozen champions on their resume. Crawford does not have that. And more importantly, he doesn't have about a dozen A-grade names on his record. He just doesn't have it. It is what it is, period. People can like it, they can not like it. Anyways, let's see. Meanwhile, their contemporaries continue to give praise and media plays deaf, dumb, and blind. Well, definitely, in a way, Crawford and Usyk, in my view, have a great respect for each other. But anyways, let's see. Let's see. This is actually a good comment right here. Yet you accused Inoue of saying black fighters have no spirit when fighting when he never said. But make no mistake, Inoue is impressed with Bud, though Inoue knows he himself is the best. I agree with that comment completely. Once again, this shows you how much of a snake that Dante's Boxing Nation actually is. And once again, I'm not a person overall that, you know, is just up to attack a channel or attack someone's live being or their, you know, their living. But Dante's Boxing Nation makes a living overall off of a bunch of bullshit ass narratives, just like overall, you know, a certain amount of these other channels do. And at the end of the day, I'm not stating that ESPN and some of these other areas are perfect, but to be quite honest with you, if we're gonna compare it, the LDBC and new media are probably even more biased than what ESPN and Ring Magazine would be. They're probably even more biased than what those are. It is what it is. Anyways. I was thinking the same thing, Dante. I was surprised Inoue said that seeing how that fight was almost a year ago shows that fighters aren't prisoners of the moment like fans of media or other 2 pound-for-pound top fighters call it how they see it. I agree. So then once again, you guys should keep that same energy when pound-for-pound fighters like Devin Haney or allegedly Gervonta Tank Davis, who you guys have had on your pound-for-pound list for a while, even though he's not defeated anybody, really, other than Ryan Garcia, when it comes down to it. You know, Gervonta Tank Davis, when he called Canelo the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, Devin Haney, the Charlo brothers, Jamel Charlo, remember that guy, you know, that apparently was top 5 pound-for-pound according to these guys, you know, and other black fighters were claiming that Canelo was #1 pound-for-pound. How come all of a sudden their opinion didn't matter? And they were just appeasing to the race fans. You know, how come you didn't take their opinion into account? Was it because Canelo Alvarez wasn't one of your favorite black fighters there, Dante's Boxing Nation? Anyways. Let's see. 2 times undisputed champion in 2 different weight classes. Who else did that? Well, Mr. Naoya Inoue and Alexander Usyk did that, sir, to answer your question. Maybe you don't watch enough boxing. I don't know. But anyways, who else did that? Not even the great Mayweather or Pacquiao. Enough said. At the end of Crawford's career, he'll go down as top 3 greatest of all time if Canelo fights him and he beats Canelo top 2. Well, if he beats Canelo Alvarez, he'll certainly be for sure within my top 10. Crawford is, kind of already knocking into the door of that conversation, kind of like Canelo in my view. But the problem is with Crawford is that I'm not exactly sure where to rank him. In terms of skills, he's up there, especially after that Spence performance with pretty much almost any fighter that I've seen. But the problem is that, overall, I don't think that, he really has enough of a resume overall to be up there with a Mayweather or a Pacquiao. When you talk about a Mayweather, you're talking about a guy that defeated a lot of pound-for-pound fighters and a lot of A-grade level fighters. And it's the same thing with Manny Pacquiao. When you talk about Pacquiao, he defeated guys like Eric Morales, Migo Cotto, Marco Antonio Barrera, other guys overall like that, even Ricky Hatton, some other guys, maybe that I'm not mentioning, when they were all looked at as top 10 pound for pound. And that's not even considering guys that would not have been top 10 pound for pound when he defeated them, like probably that of, what's his name? Keith Thurman. I mean, Timothy Bradley was considered top 10 pound per pound because he got that robbery in the first Pacquiao fight. Marquez, of course, other fighters like that. Whew. Excuse me, my bad. But anyways, in terms of Terence Bud Crawford being top 2 or top 3, I don't think that I would agree that he's quite there in the top 2 or top 3, because I think that you have to have a resume to be up there that high, just in my personal view. And I don't think that Crawford has that. But he has enough of a resume, in my view, to be within the top 20 to top 30 conversation. That's where he kind of is, in my view. Which is still a very great ranking, for an all-time great fighter. But it's interesting because these guys always, of course, love to talk about, black fighters not getting enough credit. Well, here's the question. If Terence Bud Crawford is, top 3 all-time already, and not even the great Pacquiao or the great Mayweather did that, where does that place Alexander Usyk and Naoya Inoue in terms of boxing history, just because they became undisputed in 2 separate weight classes? And I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, Crawford did it in more competitive weight classes. Well, did he really? Because was the 140-pound weight class really a super dangerous weight class? Was anyone taking a look at Thomas Delorme and Joyous Ndongo and saying, yes, those guys are top 10 pound per pound? Because those were 2 of the guys that he won the belts off of right there. And then, of course, there was Victor Postal, who was a very decent fighter, but I don't think that anyone was ever debating that he was top 10 pound per pound. And, of course, when he unified the welterweight class, of course, great run. But at the end of the day, it's not like he went the Errol Spence Jr. route and was fighting all the top contenders there. It's not like he fought Kell Brook when he was the IBF champion. It's not like he fought overall, Sean Porter, when he was champion. I mean, well, to be fair, he fought Sean Porter at an A-grade point in his career, so I'm going to give Crawford credit for that. But it's not like he fought Danny Garcia the way that Spence did. It's not like he fought Sean Porter or Kell Brook or Yordenis Ugas the way that Spence did. He didn't do that. All right, he fought a bunch of the other guys that would have not been top 5 in the weight class overall, more than likely. And, Errol Spence pretty much did a lot of the heavy lifting within that fight. All right, is what it is. Now, of course, Crawford, it doesn't really matter because he eventually ended up beating the guy that everyone said that he needed to. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter by that much, but that does have to be mentioned. Crawford, so if we're going to have this debate about, oh, well, Crawford did it in more competitive weight classes, right, but he really didn't go through a lot of the super competitive guys. So if we're talking about Terence Crawford's resume, it's really comparable, to be quite honest with you, with that of Usyk and that of Naoya Inoue. So if you're going to place Terence Bud Crawford within the top 10 fighters of all time, you should have Inoue and Alexander Usyk right there, or at the very least, Alexander Usyk. Anyways, but let's see. People like Inoue be cool, but his fans and the media being so biased is the turnoff. It's the same thing for Eminem or Caitlin Clark. The individuals are cool, but the media and the race fans are sickening. Once again, you see this with a lot of the insecure pro-blackity blacks overall within that of America. They're all mentioning overall that of Caitlin Clark because they're getting really pissed off that the one that's finally bringing attention to the WNBA is that of Caitlin Clark. That's a Caucasian. Listen, it is what it is. If you want to talk about, of course, Caitlin Clark, her bringing a certain amount of attention to the WNBA is a part of her package, of course, that she's a Caucasian woman. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Do you think that Tiger Woods, for example, that a big part that his black skin color or his quote unquote black race, if you want to call it, that it was not a big part of his appeal in terms of the marketing, in terms of golf? Of course it was. But does anyone take a look at Tiger Woods and say, oh, this black dude, they only hype him up so much overall because he's black? You know, were any of these guys, you know, basically saying that, or Patrick Mahomes right now for the NFL? Because at the end of the day, when you're dominant in a sport that especially is not usually dominated by that demographic, you're going to get extra attention. It is what it is. That's how the things work. And if the media is going to roll with it and cover them more, guess what? Is what it is. That's why they cover Tiger Woods more. That's also part of the reason why they cover Patrick Mahomes more, because at the end of the day, race does sell. But that doesn't always mean that it's a bad thing. But these guys are so insecure about it, and a lot of those dumbass women, you know, with that dying ass league that they have in the WNBA, they're so damn insecure about a Caucasian chick overall being the new face of the league when it comes down to it. You know, that basically overall they can't handle it. The WNBA right now, they should be happy to get whatever bone that they want to. They've been failing the whole entire time that they really overall have been in company. So to be quite honest with you, you should really be taking this as a gift. But because so many of them are so damn insecure and they want to compete with men all the time, and they're so worried about these liberal and super racial issues that they shouldn't be worried about. At the end of the day, Caitlin Clark is a blessing to that of the WNBA. If you want to grow your league and if you want to subsidize your league, kind of like the NBA. Magic Johnson was a big part of the growth, but it would have not grown anywhere near as much if they did not have that little racial tension between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, at least between a lot of the fans. Of course, that was a big part of the reason of why the NBA ended up building. They had to build off of that a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, these guys are too stupid to realize that. Is what it is. Anyways. Let's see what this comment has to say. Notice you'll never see Canelo Alvarez give credit to another fighter the way Inoue, Bud, Usyk do. With Canelo, it's all about me, me, me. I'm number one. Well, what the fuck is Canelo Alvarez supposed to do, sir? Say that he believes that other fighters are greater than him when he's one of the top fighters in the world. Is that what John Jones is supposed to do in the UFC? Is that what Djokovic is supposed to do in tennis? Is that what some of these other guys are supposed to do? Is say that they believe that this guy is number one over me in terms of the all-around pound-for-pound list. Now, of course, one can make the debate that, well, Canelo's never going to fight some of these guys anyway. But why is it Canelo Alvarez's job as one of the top pound-for-pound fighters and a guy that believes he's the best fighter on the planet? Why the fuck is that his job overall to say that he believes that this dude's number one pound-for-pound? That's not Canelo Alvarez's job. You know, it's just very interesting. These guys love to bitch, moan, and complain, and they want all these other races to give credit to the black fighters, but they don't want to give any credit to that of the same, you know, to that of other races. It is what it is, at least for that of fighters. All right, Dante loves to bitch, moan, and complain overall about how Canelo is not giving credit to Gervonta Tank Davis or how he won't acknowledge him. Right, so where are you overall when, you know, certain black fighters are degrading certain fighters like Naoya Inoue or other Caucasian fighters, or, you know, or excuse me, Inoue's Japanese, of course, but, you know, Caucasian fighters and non-black fighters? Where are you to be found, Dante? Where are you to be found? So it is what it is, you know, and don't get it twisted overall. You know, but I don't think that, you know, those fighters have to give handouts. If you're a fighter and if you don't give credit to anybody else, at least in terms of being better than you, why overall should any of us have a problem with that? They're in a competitive sport. They're doing overall what they believe they're meant to be doing. Why should any of us have a problem overall with the fact that they don't claim that anyone is better than them? You know, now if we want to claim that we disagree with their personal stance, you know, overall because you haven't accomplished that yet, so slow your roll a little bit, that's something that I can kind of understand. But when you talk about an accomplished fighter like a Canelo Alvarez that doesn't claim anyone else is the better fighter over him or is debatably number one pound for pound, why the fuck would Canelo Alvarez want to do that? Canelo Alvarez believes that he's the greatest fighter of this generation, and he has every right to believe that. It is what it is. Anyways, Usyk has always had Bud as his favorite fighter and pound for pound number one. Bud, after Usyk's win over Fury, said a case can be made for Usyk. A real G recognized real. That's how you know Canelo isn't a pound for pound fighter. Right, so if Gervonta Tank Davis doesn't give Devin Haney or some of these other guys credit, that means that Gervonta Tank Davis isn't a true pound for pound fighter, right? That's what that means. Absolutely fucking stupid. But anyways, that's how a lot of these guys think. Anyways, but let's see. Old media hate us so bad it's a shame. Well, listen, at the end of the day, old media, in my view, does discriminate somewhat against black fighters, you know, because they can also, you know, start a lot of the narratives of, you know, black fighters being quote unquote boring and all this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, if we're also going to go there, ESPN has had Terence Bud Crawford as the number one pound for pound fighter, I believe, ever since Crawford has defeated that of Errol Spence Jr. And to be quite honest with you, they even had him as the number one pound for pound fighter a little bit earlier than that, when, to be quite honest with you, it really wasn't super deserving. So, you know, they can bitch, moan, and complain about that all they want to, but Crawford actually not only at times has gotten the credit that he deserved, he's actually gotten a little bit more credit than what he actually deserves. Anyways, but let's see. But for me, it's pound for pound, then Usyk, then the monster Inoue. I really don't have a problem with that list. When you talk about Inoue, when you talk about Usyk, when you talk about Crawford, any one of those fighters, 1, 2, 3. Canelo Alvarez, of course, also kind of being in that conversation. But right now, he kind of has to lag behind them a little bit just because his dominance has been a little bit more strained as of late. So I kind of have to go with him at number 4 at the moment. But any one of 4 of those fighters, you could debate clearly as the number 1 pound for pound fighter. I really don't have a problem with it. The thing is with Dante that kills me always is that he loves to tell you all this shit about Crawford is clearly undisputed. What makes Crawford clearly undisputed the number 1 pound for pound fighter? Because when you talk about dominance, Alexander Usyk and that overall of Naoya Inoue have pretty much been just as dominant as that of Terence Bud Crawford. They're all 3 undefeated fighters. They're all extremely skilled, you know, when you talk about the complete game. And in terms of resumes, it's not like Terence Bud Crawford. It's not like overall that he has a completely better resume than those guys. So what's the reason? You know? Anyways, but let's see. Bud is still number 1. Tank has a chance to take the reins depending on how he look against Frank. Well, no, actually he doesn't. There's no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis. I like Gervonta Tank Davis. But, you know, Frank Martin is not going to be a fighter that's going to realistically, at least in my view, rank him as the number 1 pound per pound fighter. In my view, for you to ever be at least definitively the number 1 pound per pound fighter, you have to have at least defeated one fighter, in my view, on the top 10 pound per pound list, at least debatably, or at the very least within the top 20 or top 15. You know, so it is what it is. Usyk and Crawford were both able to recently do it. Gervonta Tank Davis hasn't even faced anyone within the top 20 pound per pound. I mean, if you want to count Ryan Garcia, you know, that's up to you. But, you know, personally, in my view, no. The win over Frank Martin is not going to put Gervonta Tank Davis in the top, at number 1. It's also not going to put him in the top 5. All right, period. Because that fight is not going to be a fight to where a fighter who has never been a champion, although very decently talented, that's not going to be a fight that's going to put you number 1 pound per pound. Crawford has faced repeated champions. Crawford overall, you know, he's done more within the sport, within more weight classes, won more belts, actually been undisputed in 2 separate weight classes. Tank hasn't done anything like that, all right? It's whatever. Anyways, but let's see. My pound for pound, Crawford, Tank, Inoue, Canelo, Boots. Well, I agree with Crawford, Inoue, and Canelo. Personally, I can't put Tank up there because he just hasn't faced anybody. In terms of talent, he's up there with a lot of people. But in terms of accomplishments, he just doesn't have it. In terms of accomplishments and resume, he just doesn't have it. And Boots certainly doesn't have it. Boots is an excellent talent. Excellent talent. One of the top, you know, talents out there, no doubt about it. But he's only won 1 belt in his career, and he really hasn't defeated anybody either. That's how you also know a lot of these guys, like on these channels, that love to bitch, moan, and complain. Now, to be fair, I don't know this individual. Maybe he's different. But a lot of these guys, like, they love to bitch, moan, and complain about, oh, well, how can Lomachenko be number 1 pound for pound? You know, he hasn't defeated anybody. You've got to defeat multiple contenders. You can't be on this level. You got to defeat multiple contenders. Canelo can't be here because he's got to face more contenders than all these other guys. Right, but Terence Bud Crawford defeats like 3 total A-grade fighters for his whole entire career. And he's already right there with Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Sugar Ray Leonard and all those guys. That's what you're telling me? All right, why? Just because he's a black fighter? and he's one of your favorite fighters? You know? Anyways, but, you know, is what it is. But let's see. I'm honestly not quite sure if I'm going to read all this. Let's see. Anyways, but let's see. And this is pretty much about Inoue cementing his path overall as being a great fighter. And I agree, Inoue, in my view, you could already count him as an all-time great fighter if he retired today. But the interesting thing is that DontaesBoxingNation, once again, whenever he talks about Inoue, you realize in the last video when he knocked out Louis Neri, what did DontaesBoxingNation say about Mr. Naoya Inoue? He said, well, Inoue's going to have to move up another weight class and, you know, take on more challenges because that's what the all-time greats did. Right, but Terence Bud Crawford is already an all-time great in your eyes. Why? Because Inoue is a 4-weight division champion. He's moved up more weight classes than what Terence Bud Crawford has. And if we're going to go there, it's not like Terence Bud Crawford is completely outsized by these welterweights. Crawford is a dude with a 74-inch arm reach, 5'8", and rehydrates at 160 plus pounds. So it's not like overall he's been outsized by any of these guys, really. At least not majorly. So once again, how come Inoue has to take on all these more challenges to prove he's all-time great, but Crawford, he's already done it. And keep in mind, DontaesBoxingNation had Steven Coolboy Fulton as a top 10 pound-per-pound fighter, and he had Fulton dominating Inoue. So how come Inoue needs to take on more challenges to be an all-time great fighter, Dante? How come that is? Or in the possible debate as the number 1 pound-per-pound fighter, how come that is? Very interesting. But anyways. LOL, all of a sudden Inoue's opinion is validated. Every other Inoue or certain fighters are brought up. They get downplayed and no respect, but when these guys speak highly of Crawford, they cool. Agreed, sir. Thank you for calling out Dante's Boxing Nation's snake-ass bullshit. Thank you for calling that out. Once again, this dude is so full of shit. This dude overall is like such a politician. This dude is just lying through his fucking teeth in every single video. This dude is so full of it. Anyway, agreed, sir. Thank you for pointing that out. Every time there's a comment by a non-black fighter, whenever they compliment a non-black fighter, it's not taken seriously. Or if they criticize a black fighter, it's called racialized or racism. But then anytime they say something positive about a black fighter that they like, it's taken 100% seriously. But then also at the same time, when a black fighter that Dante's Boxing Nation supports, when they say something about Canelo Alvarez or Usyk or something like that, either A, he don't talk about it, like when Crawford recently just stated that Usyk could be number 1 pound per pound, or he states that they're appeasing to the race fans and that they're coons and that they're being Uncle Toms. Ain't that a bitch? Ain't that a bitch? Anyway, let's see. Let's actually look at this comment here. Yo, we not about to talk like he beat his Spence and no damage. EJ isn't the same after that accident. Had he beat him like that before, then he gets full credit. So stop with this easy win shit. Well, I give Crawford a lot of credit for defeating Errol Spence Jr. Now I understand why a lot of people, of course, would say that Errol Spence Jr. was a little bit more damaged goods. And you can claim that he was a little bit rusty if you want to. That's up to you. But I'm not going to go on this complete narrative to state that Errol Spence was just complete damaged goods, because he looked so good in the Yordenis Ugas fight. And I don't think that Ugas is quite on the level maybe as some of the other boxers that Errol Spence Jr. had faced. That would have been in the welterweight class. But at the end of the day, Spence looked supremely dominant within that fight, to the point where he actually broke Yordenis Ugas' orbital eye bone. And Ugas was never the same fighter again after that. Never the same after that. So I give I give Terence Bud Crawford a lot of credit for that win. What I will state is this, is that if you want to get on the neck of Dante's Boxing Nation a little bit more, for keeping the same standards, what we should address is that Dante. You claim that Vasily Lomachenko didn't deserve as much credit for Nicholas Walters and Guillermo Rigondeaux because he fought them after a year layoff. So how come Crawford is not held to the same standard when he fought Yuri Urkus Gamboa after a year layoff and Errol Spence Jr. on like a 14-month layoff? How come those same standards are not applied? That's what we can ask, in my personal view. But anyways, so let's see here. Game recognized game. This is like the 2010s NBA. Crawford is like the vet Kobe defending his crown as the best player. And Inoue is like the prime Braun working up, establishing his name with greats with his sensational athleticism and performances. That's not the worst comparison. That's not the worst comparison. Kobe Bryant, in terms of my basketball analysis, he probably was a little bit overrated as a player. Now he's still an all-time great player. Debatably top 10, certainly at the very least top 15 of all time, in my view, when it comes down to it. But actually, this needs to be discussed in terms of a basketball reference. A lot of people actually like to say that Kobe Bryant was the clear best player of the 2000s. He wasn't. The best player, to be quite honest with you, of the 2000s was probably Tim Duncan. Because first of all, the first 3 championships in Kobe's career, they weren't really his championships. Now, if you want to give him half credit for those championships, that's up to you. He was not the best player on those teams. It was Shaquille O'Neal. All right? It was Shaq. Tim Duncan was the most important factor on every single championship that he won, or he was the deciding factor. The Spurs have never won a championship or ever been to the finals without Tim Duncan. All right? Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe, they made it to the finals together. Shaq, of course, was able to make another finals before Kobe. And, of course, he was able to make another one after Kobe. And he was able to win one, I believe, in 2006 with the Miami Heat in a completely fixed series, overall for that, the Miami Heat no doubt about it. But, still overall a win, is what it is. But Tim Duncan was all around the greatest player of the 2000s. He won the most amount of MVPs, at least when you talk about those players, with him, Shaq and Kobe, Dirk Nowitzki, those guys. LeBron James, of course, had not won yet until 2012. Tim Duncan had won 3 championships in the 2000s alone. And then, of course, he won one, I believe, in 1999, and he also won one in 2014. But Tim Duncan was the best player, or he was the greatest player at the very least of that generation, But anyways, let's see. He is not active enough. Talking about Crawford, of course, doesn't matter how good he is. I am a fan, and the fact he avoided boots, he should have shown Mayweather did to Canelo. Well, what I will state is this. I'm not going to go completely by the active argument, but if you wanted to go with the argument that Inoue is more active, and on top of that, that he has championships in more weight classes, you could make a debate about that if you wanted to. I'm not quite sure if I would debate it, but if you were going to debate it, I can't argue against it too much. I would understand if that's a factor in your little analysis. I would understand, but I get that. But also addressing the boots conversation, there's been a little bit of back and forth on why that fight has not happened. Listen, obviously Crawford is not interested, at least in that fight at the moment. I don't completely blame him because he's already taken care of everything at the welterweight class. I do think that he takes a look at Jaron Boots Ennis as a threat. But at the end of the day, Crawford, I think that he just believes that Boots and him are different generations and that more than likely that he has other stuff to accomplish in other weight classes. So, of course, do I believe that Boots probably would be the biggest threat to him around the 147-pound weight class? Yes, of course. But honestly, I don't really mind Crawford not doing it because Crawford has pretty much proved everything at the 147-pound weight class, at least for his generation. So I'll give him credit there. But anyways, but it is interesting once again because Dante does not hold the same standards to other fighters, So once again, it's just very interesting how Crawford gets a pass for not fighting Jaron Boots Ennis. It's interesting. But anyways, let's see. Ask Inoue fans why you think Inoue is number one. They either going to tell you because of activity or becoming undisputed twice quicker than Crawford. LOL, LMAO. Well, sir, listen, at the end of the day, that is going to be a part of the package. If you're going to claim that Crawford deserves to be number one pound for pound because he went undisputed in 2 separate weight classes, the Inoue fans or people who are going to debate Inoue, they have every right to debate that Terence Bud Crawford, or excuse me, that Naoya Inoue, that a part of his argument as being number one pound for pound is that he did it in a faster version, and on top of that, that he fights more times per year, and that he's just as dominant. At the end of the day, if they debate that, that's up to them. And to be honest with you, that's not a unrealistic debate. That is something overall that does have to be mentioned. All right, is what it is. Anyways, but they won't say is Inoue's path to undisputed 2 times was easy path, and Crawford's path wasn't easy at all. And Inoue has been active against guys who are not known to a lot of boxing fans. Right, but just because certain fighters are known to a lot of boxing fans doesn't mean that they're necessarily not great fights. Now, would I agree that Inoue's path to undisputed was always the toughest out there? No, but the thing is, the Terence Bud Crawford is that his path to undisputed, give me a fucking break. Like, people keep trying to say that his path to undisputed wasn't easy. Who the fuck at 140 was ever going to stop Terence Bud Crawford? It was never going to be Julius Ndongo. Victor Postel is a decent little fighter, but even at his greatest, he was never above an A- level fighter. And to be honest with you, that's being generous. It is what it is. All right, Thomas Delorme certainly was not going to stop him. So that's one weight class that pretty much was an easy ride. And then you talk about 147. Who the fuck did he really ever fight there other than Sean Porter and Errol Spence really to get the titles? And he didn't even fight Sean Porter for a title. He didn't even fight Sean Porter when he was a champion. So, I mean, if you want to debate that the 147-pound run was more tough, if you want to, because of the Errol Spence Jr. win, I'd probably agree with you. But let's not sit here and act like Terence Bud Crawford has had these, super deep runs in either weight division, because that's not the case. That's just delusional. But anyway, I actually want to see some of the replies to this. Let's see. Inoue himself, quality over quantity. Anyways, let's see. Bud actually became undisputed twice before Inoue became undisputed in 2012, and won Boxer of the Year in 2014. Bud has literally done everything Inoue done before at a higher level, point blank. Plus, Inoue was dropped by a washed Neri. Well, Louis Neri is not washed. you know, he was a fighter that only had one loss in his career and was a guy that, of course, did not have a belt. But no, he was not washed. He was just nowhere near on the level of Inoue in a way. And if we're going to go there, Terence Bud Crawford was also dropped by Aegis Velasquez, who was knocked out by Virgil Ortiz, if we're going to go there. Now, the referee did not count it as a knockdown, but it was a knockdown. All right? Is what it is. So, once again, if we're going to use these points, no problem, but let's keep it across the board. Let's see. Honestly, I don't know if I'm going to read all this. Let's see. Wash Neri is 29 years old. Y'all always trying to make excuses to try to discredit him every time he wins. It's ridiculous. I do agree with that. That's a little bit ridiculous. To state that he was washed up only after one loss, and he hasn't lost ever since that fight. And it was a fight against Brandon Figueroa, a guy that gave even Stevan Coolboy Fulton a very tough fight in that fight. Yeah, that's something that is a little bit ridiculous in my view. I wouldn't say that Luis Neri is washed. He's just not the fighter that Inoue is. That's all it is. Anyways, let's see. Let's see. Neri got dominated by Fig. Well, I don't know if he got dominated in that fight, but he did get stopped. Inoue struggled for 3 rounds. Get at it. Well, Inoue really didn't struggle for 3 rounds. Inoue, I think, was coming in there smelling his own fumes a little bit. He got dropped in the first round, and pretty much overall after that, he pretty much, was gone. And pretty much overall was like a rocket going off in the space. It was a little bit slow at first, but then once he got his, feet under him, it pretty much, was gone. Is what it is. And, if we're also going to compare it, Terence Bud Crawford had a very tough time against Aegis Velasquez. To be honest with you, he lost multiple rounds against Aegis Velasquez. Inoue really only lost 1 round against that of Luis Neri. But anyway. Stop pretending to be a brother, you weird dude. That's what a lot of these guys overall will call you. They'll call you weirdos, overall, if they don't have a great argument. And maybe that guy is. I don't know. But anyways. Let's see. Now you just lying. Inoue didn't struggle against Neri at all. Inoue got dropped. That's the only problem he had. And I'm black, believe it or not. Well, I mean, Inoue maybe struggled against Neri a little bit. But at the end of the day, once he really started to take the fight a little bit more seriously and realized that Neri was a little bit more of a threat than what he thought, or that he had the potential to knock him down and that he made a mistake, it pretty much wasn't competitive from that moment on. So it's whatever. But once again, it's not like, I don't really understand these arguments, because Crawford has really had fights like this as well. Like, people are acting like the fight against Jose Benavidez, that Crawford just won every single round. He didn't. People are acting like Crawford didn't lose a couple rounds against a washed-up Kell Brook. People are acting like Terence Bud Crawford, like he didn't have a knockdown against Aegis Velasquez, or really get knocked down in that fight, and that he wasn't losing multiple rounds. So, I mean, if we're using these points, I mean, it's up to you, but once again, this is why I claim that Inoue and Crawford, they're pretty much within the same category. Their careers are pretty much right there, parallel with each other. But anyways, that's going to be it for that comment. Let's see. He ain't the best. Bud is better. And Tank would sleep Naoya. He's really good, though. Well, of course, Tank is supposed to sleep Naoya in a way, because he's about 3 or 4 weight classes heavier than Naoya in a way. And he has a punch that can knock out some welterweights. Of course, he's going to sleep Naoya in a way. The question is that if they were in the same weight class, what would happen? We don't know. We'll probably never know. So to me, that really doesn't say much. To me, what that's saying is, like, if Canelo Alvarez or someone overall like that within the 168-pound weight class, who's more of a natural 168-pounder, that's like me saying overall that someone within that weight class knocks out Terence Bud Crawford. What does that really say? Like, what are we talking about there? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Anyways, but that's pretty much about it for this comment section. I just thought that I would review that. But once again, like I've always been stating, and I've been stating it for a very long time, Crawford, Inoue, and Usyk, at least at the moment, their careers are pretty much parallel. They're pretty much along the same lines in my personal view. Now, a fight, I'll tell you what, that I would love to see Terence Bud Crawford in, actually, would be against the middleweight champion, Janibek. If Terence Bud Crawford could actually defeat Janibek, which I would not expect him to, really, to be quite honest with you, that would be an impressive win. And if Crawford were to lose to Janibek, I could not hold it against him too much, because he would be, at the very least, probably about 2 weight classes above his weight. And Janibek is a very decent athlete. Like, that dude can punch. That dude is fast. Honestly, that dude could possibly even give Canelo Alvarez a little bit of fits. So Inoue is nothing to fuck around with. But we'll see if Crawford will take that fight. I doubt it because I don't think that fight is really on his mind. But we'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. Talk to y'all later.